So what is this watershed? Basically, it's an area that sheds water. Wow. It's not a location where you store water. It's a place where it sheds water, where it all the water comes from that location, goes to one place. And so if we look at this picture, what you can see is that this area right here are all part of this watershed because they flow down into one area. And it goes down through here eventually to the ocean. Around our area, we are in one watershed that goes down into the Arroyo, that goes down into the LA River. If we go over the other side by Irwindale, they have a river over there that is not part of our individual part of the river, the watershed. Their water goes into the river that's over there. Anyone have questions? And therefore, it's a different watershed to begin with. Eventually, it joins up with the LA River. But up here, it's different than ours. If we look here in the United States, you can see here, west of the Rockies, east of the Sierras, what's that watershed? That goes down and empties into the Gulf of Mexico, into the Baja, yeah. What? It starts with the C. Colorado River watershed. Likewise, this one up here, you've got the one that goes through Washington. You've got the one that goes through here, starts up in my home state, Minnesota, and travels down here. Now, it's called separate ones because, for example, you've got the Missouri coming off here, you've got the Ohio coming off here, but essentially it's all part of the Mississippi watershed because they all flow together to make it down to the ocean. If we look here, I like this one a little bit better because number 4 up there is all the places that the water comes from in the United States that flow down the Mississippi. Have any of you walked across the river? I did. When did you do it?
When I was like a kid.
Where?
I don't know. I don't remember where. It took me just off the loading and we crossed the river.
When I walked across this Mississippi River. I was at the headwaters of the Mississippi River where it leaves a lake, and basically it's rocks walking across basically like that, and I walked across the Mississippi River. It starts at places like that, and eventually it all drains together to make it to the ocean. That's the watershed. Now, in that, we also have to take into account other things that get into that. Now, that's not what we're covering right now, but eventually we're going to get to the point, what's making it into the water? And we're going to learn about things called point sources and non-point sources. Point sources is you can point and say it's coming from you. That's in particularly true of corporations that are making something like DDT. DDT was only made in a few different locations back in the 50s and 60s. And therefore, when it went into the ocean or wherever, they found that DDT, they could go back and point to that particular location and say, that's where it's coming from. However, in the Midwest, can you point to a particular cattle or chicken or whatever to figure out where the nitrogens are coming from? From all the manure? No. That would be non-point source pollution. Now, some places are having problem with watersheds. What do we mean by impervious here? What's meant by impervious? I know it's a Friday, but is the water going down into the ground? No, it's collecting on the blacktop. There have been blacktops created, parking lots where it's not impervious. Talk at your tables. How would it be possible to make a parking lot that's not impervious to water, where it would allow the water to soak down into the aquifer as opposed to running off and causing all kinds of problems. Talk. If you want to go sit over there, that's fine. Might be easier. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Table 4. Any idea? What would you do to make it pervious?
Well, we would like have a drainage system, but it's not like holes in the ground where it's not big enough for like cars to fall down, things that occur, but like small enough that, but also big enough for water to go through at like a reasonable rate into the ground.
Okay. Anyone have any other idea? Yeah.
Can you make it like slanted so that the water doesn't go?
If it goes like that, the problem with that is it starts going fairly fast. What happens when it gets to the end? It's going to cause erosion. The water's moving so fast that it's going to pick up a lot of the stuff. What people have found is, like you've said, in different countries, they're actually in parking lots drilling holes down in. The other thing that's fascinating they found in Europe is a lot of blacktops. You know how you lay it down and about 3 years later they had to put a new one up? What they have found is that, oh, let's take all the plastic bottles, plastic bags, and melt it in with the asphalt. And then as you're putting it down, you stick holes down into it, and two things happen. Because of the plastic, it makes it so it lasts longer. And then with the holes in it, it makes it so that more water is going down into the aquifer as opposed to out just into the ocean. Now, the riparian area is where you've got it's like the river. And here is we're going to have runoff. Now, one of the things that happens around here is, do we have trees and stuff like that next to the river? No, it's basically gravel. It's basically concrete and stuff like that. And therefore, or other things where it's going to come down and it's going to hit the soil and stuff like that, and it's going to erode it away. And can we use it after that? No, it's elsewhere. And so oftentimes what we need to do is plant things around a river so it's more natural. And it looks cool like that. Any questions on that? Okay, soils. Soils are what we're going to be having a lab on Tuesday. And to do a lab on soils, what do we need? Soil. Did you get the text message?
Yes.
Okay, good. Text message saying bring it in, you get extra credit points. Good. So, soil. We need it all the times, and there's various qualities of soil that make it different. There are differences in infiltration, basically meaning how fast water goes down. Leaching. Leaching means that it goes in and it collects some of the nutrients and makes it leach down farther into it, making it so it's not available for the crops. Porosity is how big the pores are, which means how fast does the water go through it. Permeable means how much can go in. The texture is dependent on what it's made of. And then the structure is like what kind. Is it made from rocks that are coal? Or is it made from rocks that are limestone? And then you've got the pH, which will determine what kind of plants will grow in it. Because some plants will only grow on certain pH, because the pH helps determine what kind of chemicals are released into the soil. And so more acidic might release nitrogen, which they may like more. So some of the qualities are divided into here, as seen by the texture. If we look at clay, we use clay to make coffee cups. Even without firing it, it's still a fairly decent coffee cup. It will hold water very well. It has a lot of nutrients, but it doesn't allow water to go through it. It holds it very well. Part of the problem why it's not always good for growing things is it does not allow a lot of air down into the soil. Okay? And tilth means how well does it basically allow crops to grow. If we look at silt, silt is not as fine as clay. Clay is so fine that nothing goes to it. Silt is not quite as fine, and it's got a lot of some nutrients on it. It allows things to go okay, and all the way across. It's okay. With sand, there are a lot of nutrients there, but are they available for use? No, because they have not been broken down. Because they are larger particles, they allow water to go down into them fairly easily, but they don't hold very much water. That makes them fairly poor for growing organisms. That's why in the desert, the plants typically have roots that are very, very, very deep, so it can go down into the water table, or very close to the surface, so anytime there is a rain, they will be able to get the water before it goes away. They have a lot of air into them and so forth. Loam is a combination of all three. It's the best combination of all three, where it's good at all of those things. Any questions? If we look at this thing, this looks like a heck of a lot of confusion. This is called a soil triangle. And what you do is you're going to, say you're given 20% silt, you would go, oh great, it doesn't have the numbers. Right here along this line right here. If it says 20% clay, I believe that would be right here. And 60% sand would be right through here. Okay? Where the three cross is what kind of soil it is. This is a sandy clay, which means it's not very good at things. So this, no, hold it. Clay would be across this way. So silt is down this direction. Clay is across this way. Sand is across this way. And where the three of them meet is the type of soil it's going to be. I'm not very good at these, as obvious. So what you may be asked to do on a test is try to figure out what kind of soil it is. Okay. Is it clay, which means it's not going to grow a lot? Or is it loam, which means it's going to grow lots and lots of stuff? That's where you want most of your soil being from, is from loam. Questions? Now, soils form due to the climate. For example, if you are super, super dry like a desert, are you going to form very good soil? No. If you're super, super wet like a rainforest, are you going to keep the soil? You're going to form lots of soil, but because of all the rain, all the soil goes away. In fact, all the nutrients are in the living organisms. If, however, you're a grassland, that is where some of the best soil is found. Why? Because per square meter, per square football field, there are more plants than on any other biome on the planet. Sheer numbers. And when they grow up, and eventually they fall over and die, keep the nutrients in them. But about every 7 to 20 years, 10 to 20 years, there's going to be a fire. And when there's a fire, all the nutrients that are in that dead material get released back down into the soil. And that helps fertilize upcoming plants. Are there living organisms there to eat it and then poop it? Because, again, that helps break it down and puts nitrogen and stuff back into it. What does it come from? Is it going to be from lava, or is it going to be from limestone? Those are going to give us different types of material. What is if you've got perfectly flat, like a prairie, you're going to have the ability for it not to lose it. However, if you're a mountain slope like here, do we have very good soil here? No. Right now we do, because we've been importing soil for a long time. If we look back, go up to like Duke Major Park and stuff like that, it is part of an area known as La Crescenta. The other name for La Crescenta is Rock Crescenta, because if I dig down 2 or 3 feet into my yard, I can't dig any farther because there's so many rocks down there. Therefore, the topography makes it so that it loses the soil instead of staying there. And it depends on how much time has gone by. If we look at that, there are different levels of soil based on what's happening on it. Let's look at this one. If we look at the very bottom, the R and C level, sea horizons, are where there's rock. Not much has happened here, not much erosion. If we look right above that, go to the very top, the O horizon, that is where there is a lot of organic material, like grass, trees, animals, remains, and stuff like that. Right below that, the A horizon is the best soil, where you've got the qualities of the rock below it, but it also has all the organic material that supplies the nutrients for the plants. The B is halfway in between, and it's there. Okay. Like I said, the climate is going to help determine how much moisture is there, how much heat is there. It's going to tell us how fast things are going to grow and stuff like that. I've talked about this already. Parent material is going to help topography, time. If there's more time, more chance for fires, there's going to be more nutrients put back in. So sometimes we lose it through erosion. There are 2 types of erosion, either physical erosion or chemical erosion. Physical erosion would be happening like up at Yosemite. They have cracks in their walls all over the place. And water gets down into those cracks. In the winter, that expands. And when it expands, it starts breaking the rock away. That's a type of weathering. Eventually, it's going to crack away and crack away and crack away and get smaller and smaller rock. Sometimes you can get plants growing into the places between rocks. And when that happens, that's going to expand and break the rock open also. Or you're going to have a gopher going down through the rock and so forth, going to break it apart. Chemical is basically always dealing with water. Is it going to dissolve it? Are there chemicals in the water that are going to help dissolve it? Is there going to be, for example, a lot of this acid in it, which is going to break apart limestone? Okay. Have you ever taken coral and put it in vinegar? If you do that, it will bubble. Why? Because it's calcium carbonate, just like limestone. And when you add acid to it, things are acid, it's going to break it apart. This is a type of weathering. You can see this woman down at the bottom looking at all these fissures. If water gets inside of this during the winter, it will crack it apart. Sometimes there's mass wastings. It's called mass wastings. Another way of saying it is landslides. This will cause some erosion also, development of new soil. Sometimes erosion can be where the sheets, where a whole bunch is going to be going down all at once, and sometimes the erosion happens along the stream. If you've got a huge incline, you're going to have sheet erosion, where a whole bunch pulls the material down all at once, sort of like with a landslide. Stream erosion is where the water's going gently through and it's pulling the materials along. Soil chemistry is very, very important in determining what kind of plants are going to grow there. Not just the pH, but also 3 different nutrients. The pH is going to say, well, if it's too acidic, certain nutrients are not going to be released into the soil. If those nutrients are not released in the soil, certain plants will not grow there. For example, corn needs a heck of a lot of nitrogen. If the nitrogen's not there, the corn's not going to grow. Contrary to that would be soybeans. Soybeans grow very, very well most places. Why? Because they've got little bacteria that pull down the nitrogen from the air and help it do it. And I have actually, my dad worked for a fertilizer company, and I've seen him and a farmer trying to test to see what they need to do to the soil to make it the right pH. And they would take a piece of it, put it in their mouth, and go, oh, it's too sour. If it's too sour, that means it's too acidic. Oh, it's too sweet, which means it's too basic, which we need to do something else. If it's too acidic or too basic, it's going to remove certain ions. If it is too acidic, what you need to do is add limestone. The vinegar to the coral makes it bubble, makes it more neutral. The limestone to the acidic soil makes it more neutral. If it is too basic, what you do is add steer manure. Why? Because the steer manure gets bacteria in it. Bacteria break it down, and it releases, besides the smell, which is always bad right at the end of summer school, but it really makes it more acidic. The nitrogen. Remember, the pH is one part of it. The three nutrients are nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Nitrogen is important because it makes the plants green. If there's green, there's going to be a lot of photosynthesis. Everyone's happy. It means that there's going to be more protein available for the plant. It can be added as basically as steer manure or anhydrous ammonia. Anhydrous ammonia is disgusting. I almost died because of anhydrous ammonia. What happens is you've got this great big huge long tank about from me to the wall, center of the classroom to the wall, that is great big huge tank. And there's a hose that comes out of it that goes to a plow. And that plow has things that go underground that add the anhydrous ammonia underground. And when it gets down there, it sticks in the ground so that it's going to be available for the plants. If you're a plant like a bean, like I said, they have the bacteria, the rhizobacterium. They're going to take the nitrogen out of the atmosphere and put it down into the soil so that they're able to survive. Phosphorus, however, is for strong roots. If you don't have strong roots, you're not going to be able to take up water. If you can't take up water, you're not going to survive as well. It's also good for energy supply. Water makes it easier for them to do water supply. The phosphorus is also important in ATP. So again, phosphorus is good for roots. It's very important for the energy because of the ATP. Potassium, on the other hand, is very, very important in allowing carbohydrates to be transferred from the leaves down to the stems, down to the roots, down to the potatoes or other places where they store the starch. It makes the flowers prettier, makes the fruit taste better, and it helps if you've got too much nitrogen in the soil. Now, there is a rule out there. You don't need to remember the name. The rule is fairly common sense. If you have enough nitrogen, you have enough phosphorus, but you only have 50% of what you need of potassium, are you going to get good plants growing? No. It's only as good as your weakest nutrient in there. This is some fairly nasty erosion. Yeah, that's from farmers that don't take care of what's going on. Are there any questions?